Hey, homeopaths. This is Karen Allen from Trinity Health Hub. And I'd like to thank Eugenie for sharing samples of some of the lectures and live sessions that we have here on the Hub. Gear up right now for a really practical chat about impotence from one of the Hub meetups. This 19-minute session has been edited to remove the questions and comments of the group of participants, just leaving practical guidance that covers many of the things that you would want to consider or assess before you even start looking for a remedy match. You'll want to take notes, so grab a pen and notepad before you press play. Trinity Health Hub offers live and stream-on-demand training, discussion forums, and community events for homeopaths around the world. To find out more, please visit us at www.trinityhealthhub and connect with us on Instagram and Facebook. If this training is something that you'd like to be participating in, join us, subscribe. We look forward to seeing you on the Hub. I actually had somebody who emailed me and asked me some questions about impotence. She has a few clients who are impotent. And she asked me, are there some things, what should I know? Biology protects itself. And the first thing to know about impotence, if a guy can't get an erection, unless it is following on to a particular type of trauma or upset or immediately after starting a medication, because there was a guy whose wife got raped on a business trip. And after that, he couldn't get an erection. In his mind, he associated that with sexual aggression and horrible things. So for him, this was a psychological issue. But for most men, their biology is much less complex than women. I was going to say less sophisticated, and I'm not sure that's true, but it's definitely less complex. And the number one reason why guys deal with impotence is because they have cardiovascular issues. And impotence is a more reliable indicator of heart trouble than a treadmill test. The guy makes an appointment. He's not very specific about why. He comes in and he talks about everything else. And you get down to the very end and you're doing a review of body systems. And he says, well, I'm having a little erectile thing. And you say, tell me more. Yeah, and that's it. That is all he wants to say. And sometimes it's even that he doesn't say anything until it's the hand on the doorknob on the way out. Well, the thing that I'm really looking for help with is my sexual function. Or you won't find out about it until you're doing diagnostic congruence at the end and you say, who would you be if you were absolutely healthy? And he'd say, well, I'd have less stress and my toenail fungus would be gone and my sexual function would be good. And you're like, what was that last? And so a lot of guys, this is really, we have to hold this reverently and tenderly because there is a huge vulnerability about it. And we need to not be blithe about that in any way. So a lot of men, when, obviously we have to find out a little bit more. And a lot of men do not appreciate technical medical terminology in those settings. My general thing is to say, so let's just talk about the function. Sex is fun. I want everybody who's having sex to have good functional sex. Let's just review. There's a couple of stages of it. There's the getting started, there's the maintaining, and there's the finishing. Which of those are you having trouble with? Getting started, maintaining, finishing. And guys who have truly an erectile issue where they cannot get an erection will say, I'm having trouble with the getting started part. And guys who can get an erection, but they either have some sort of like hair trigger, ejaculate very quickly, or they have a problem where they lose their erection. They have the problem with the maintaining. And then there are some guys who just can never get their, in the sternum phase, or Agnes castus or something where they're just depleted and they can't reach orgasm. They can't reach ejaculation. So once you have an idea about starting, maintaining, ending, that sort of gives you some ideas about where to go. If it's starting, you are morally and ethically obligated to get that guy in for a checkup, because we have to find out what his heart stuff is, and you must see his labs. So you want a standard CBC and lipid profile, because some of these guys, you're going to want to look at their various enzymes, at their kidney function, at all the things that might indicate that muscle is being torn down. And you're going to want to find a hormone panel. One of the other things that happens is that sometimes guys just have really low testosterone. They might be on a medication, or maybe they're not working out and they put on some weight and they're under a lot of stress. So getting them into a workout routine, and the latest research that shows that you can lower your cortisol and build testosterone has you doing fast sprints, 6 to 8 seconds, and then you pause for like 30 seconds, I think. Anything you can do to help guys, this is really a problem for guys who are vegan, who are doing 100% plant-based, because for any of those guys who are older blood types and O blood type, their body is going to go into a very neutral space. Anybody that's on a plant-based diet, you want to make sure that they're covering the exercise side of it, because they need a little more support that way. The thing about a vegan diet is that there are people who do it with incredible accuracy and sophistication, and there are people who do it where they just don't eat meat. And for those people who are not doing it at a very sophisticated level, all they did was take meat out of their diet, but they're not really aware of the need to be balancing proteins. Ask somebody, for these people who are plant-based, find out, what are they using for their proteins? What are they doing in terms of supplements? Get them to keep a food diary, and then hook them up with some resources, because that's another important part of this. So the other thing for guys is that when they have had some kind of loss of potency in their life, they may have gotten laid off from their job. They may have gotten ditched by their long-term girlfriend or their wife. They may have gotten slammed by somebody who told them they weren't a good lover. And all of those things can be very discouraging. So you may need some remedies that are dealing with loss of confidence. And argentum nitricum, lycopodium, very, very common. And then the other things that are really important to do, you're gonna survey exercise and diet, because you want all the conditions that increase testosterone to be available for this guy. You also can supplement with maca. Are you guys familiar with maca, M-A-C-A? It's a powder or capsules. I generally try and get Peruvian sourced maca. I don't like the stuff that comes from a couple of other places because there's heavy metals in it. This is a great tool for guys who are impotent, or for guys who are trying to get their wife pregnant and they've got a low sperm count, or they've got poor sperm morphology. So this is one of the other things that you want to look at is this guy on antidepressants? Antidepressants have a strong impact on sex drive, and they may have lost their libido and they're trying to keep up with their wife. But so you got to ask that as a screening question. And for people who are trying to get pregnant, guys on antidepressants tend to have DNA fragmentation in the sperm. And that DNA fragmentation can contribute to pregnancy loss and difficulty conceiving. For some men, it's increased sensitivity. Just the tactile experience of sex has recently become overwhelming, and so they ejaculate very quickly. Maybe they have a new partner that they are terribly, terribly in love with. Or maybe the pheromone thing for this woman is very strong and well matched for them. Cross the subset of rubrics that are associated with the gonads and oversensitive. And anything about sensorial impressions remaining long or being too strong. So all of the Aurum salts are going to be in there. China, surprisingly, is in there. You can give people also things like argentum nitricum to take before having sex. And there is a placebo effect for that. Now, a lot of guys who come to you later in their journey are already taking some kind of additional help. They're taking one of the erectile dysfunction meds. I have not found those to be bad in terms of leaving a big thumbprint in the case the way that some birth control things can. But a lot of the guys don't want to take it. And the point that I want all of those guys to understand is if you have to take this, and the reason why your erection is not happening is because your body is trying to protect you from the strain that it creates for your heart, then that's not really a good solution for you. So, you want to get these peeps in to have a treadmill test. You want to find out what their labs are. You want to really honor and take seriously their complaint. This is especially, I've had this conversation with a couple of other older women homeopaths who are in an era where, we go through times where sex is a very important driving factor and where it's not so much. And that can ebb and flow through life. So like maybe as a homeopath, you're a new mom with a baby and ever having sex again is the last thing on your mind. Or maybe you're, in some, for whatever reason, your particular circumstance is that sex is not a big thing in your life right now. And you may have an appearance of being subtly dismissive to this guy, like, why do you care about this so much? And that is horribly disrespectful. So please watch for that. We don't ever want to do that to anybody. Once you get past that, you really have to take the case of what are the triggers, what's happening, is it only with one person, how often are you having sex, when was the last time you had sex where it was fully functional, and then look at all the labs and all that kind of stuff. So then we have the other side of this equation, which is a really frustrated woman who, there are some women where sex is never about orgasm. That's just not part of their life. But there are a lot of women where it is. And if their husband is not able to maintain, then you introduce the idea of alternatives. There are all kinds of ways to reach orgasm. There are all kinds, what about toys? What about whatever? And another thing that I've been encouraging people to do lately is to maintain really good eye contact with their partner. Just get deeply connected. In Hindi traditions, that deep connection of the eyes opens up all the chakras. And when all the chakras are opened up, that's an opportunity for more energy to flow. And sometimes that can be a big change. That can be a big help. The other thing is to ask specifically about if either of these partners has had a hip replacement, a back injury, anything that affects the nerves in the pelvis, and screen for that. And I've had clients where the entire problem was a dose of hypericum away from resolution. The guy had fallen off his roof and he had done a lot of work with the chiropractor, but he had some nerve damage. He called it phantom pain, but he had all of his limbs. So, his way of describing it was odd. The response was immediate. So we have to remember that sexual response is deeply embedded in the brain stem, because the species requires this to carry on. The biology is pretty robust. But if there is any upset to the nerves, that can be a contributing factor, even if the testosterone levels are good and the person's happy and they love their partner, or at least they're excited about their partner. Do a screen for what could have happened neurologically that could have impacted. Same thing could be true after a head injury. Healthy guys with a good level of testosterone usually wake up with an erection. If they don't, it's more likely to be related to their testosterone levels than to their cardiovascular function. Having an erection while you're not having sex actually doesn't put very much of a burden on the heart. It moves blood into the penis to make it turgid, but it's not doing the level of activity that the issue that demands so much of the heart is the effort of arousal and reaching orgasm. And that is a huge demand on the heart. There are plenty of guys where that's their last moment. I mean, let's be honest, guys, that's not a bad way to go, but bummer for their partner. For somebody who hit their head, their hormonal profile is likely to be wonky, even, maybe the guy had a car accident, or he was, doing plumbing things under the house and forgot and whacked his head. And, and a lot of guys really brush off the whole concussion thing. It's very minor as far as they're concerned. It's a good screening question because it can skew the whole hormonal profile. That's why I really like a lot of these men have never had a hormone panel. So I don't necessarily have a baseline to go back to. A lot of them are guys in their 50s or early 60s, and they've had a robust sex life all their life. And now recently they're having this issue. Recently often being like 2 or 3 years. Okay. Not recently like 6 or 8 weeks. It takes a lot. You want to see what the thyroid function is, TSH, T3, T4. You want to see what testosterone is, and just the levels of all of the sex hormones. Because we got the same sex hormones in both peeps. For men, they just test testosterone. The testosterone range on those labs is from like 17-year-old overwhelmed with it to 93-year-old, yes, I think there's still a molecule happening. That's the range. And so they'll get lab results and say, oh yeah, you're in range. But that is not what we're looking for. We're looking for middle of the range or higher. And a lot of guys are really shy to talk about this. And the more we can normalize it, the worst thing I think we can do is either be dismissive of it, like that's a stupid problem to have, why would you bring that to me? Or to in any way imply that bad sex is deserved or, no. You want to overtly state that you are pro-sex. I think people who want to be having sex ought to be having great sex. I'm your ally. I've seen this work well together, with other men, and I really believe homeopathy has some good options. So let's jump into this. And this guy is going to be so relieved. You know, because there is something about coming to a healthcare practitioner that in some way is sort of like, you know, especially if a guy had an affair and now he can't get an erection, or if he got an STD, or if he whatever. I mean, there's a lot of tender feelings and guilt about some of these things.